Clemson graduate and recently completed the Wilson Fellowship in Strategic Management for Environmental Leadership at Harvard Business School. We're really lucky to have Justin in South Carolina. You know, he originally was planning to come here in May at our picnic, and obviously that didn't happen. So we're delighted to be able to have him with us today. And Justin's going to be joined by Matthew Jeffrey, who is Director of the International Alliances Program for Audubon. And Matt's going to tell us a little bit about a shorebird program that Hilton Head Audubon had a role in initiating several years ago. And he'll give us a little bit of an update on how that's going. So, you know, without further ado, I'll welcome Justin. And Justin, if you have slides and want to share your screen, I'll leave it in your hands.
Cool, thank you. I do have some slides for today, and I'm really happy to join you today by Zoom. As John mentioned, I was really looking forward to getting out more this spring with the chapters and members, but we've been making some really good progress despite the changes that we've had to make to our work. I am really happy to be back here in South Carolina doing work that I really love, that I'm passionate about, surrounded by great people, including John. John has been a wonderful partner on a lot of this work, as many of you in the chapter and at the Sun City Club have been as well. And so we're looking forward to continuing to partner as we move forward. And I wanted to share today a little bit of an update on our work in South Carolina and some of the work that's happening with our international program that's connected to South Carolina and to the Hilton Head chapter in particular. And I think we're going to take questions at the end. Colleague Olga is going to share her screen for our slides.
Hi everyone. We're getting I'm getting permission to be able to do that. So my apologies. We're in the process of making that happen.
Hang on just a sec.
Sure, no problem. I think, there we go.
There we go.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody's patience.
It's great. Well, thank you so much. Well, this is why it's so critical, because I wanted to show you this photo that was taken by Matt Johnson, who's on our staff at Beidler Forest Center and Sanctuary earlier this spring. And you're actually the first people outside of the Audubon South Carolina staff who've been able to take a look at this photo, because we didn't want to share it because Beidler Forest was closed at the time. And we didn't want folks trying to get on site when we weren't allowing people there due to the pandemic. When Matt shared this photo with folks on staff, obviously it's a really beautiful and striking image. And it was a great reminder to us that the birds and wildlife are blissfully unaware of the human troubles that we have been navigating over the last few months. And it also reminded us that our conservation work continues, and it's just as important and just as critical as it was before the pandemic. And we've been working, as you all have been as well, to bring the joy and the escape that birds provide to people during this time. So I wanted to share this image with you. As you have probably seen in a number of articles in the news, they've highlighted the increased interest in birding and outdoor activities. And that's certainly something we've experienced through our work, and I think you have as well. And it just motivates us to continue moving forward, even as we navigate new challenges. Next slide. One area that we've been doing a lot of work, and you have as well, is around advocacy for important policies for birds. And John really recapped the recent victory on Bay Point, which we celebrate, and we say hats off to you all and to John for the work that you did on that effort. And we know that we have to remain vigilant because of the experience that we've had in recent years, that this issue may be back in the future. But a great victory for us to celebrate right now. We've been following a few other policies in the state and at the federal level that I just wanted to share a quick update because they're great updates. In September, the state legislature reconvened for a special session that they used to make up some time that they lost in the spring due to the pandemic. And we were really uncertain as to what they may do on conservation, environmental issues, because they were so focused on the COVID-19 relief. But we are pleased that they passed and the governor signed the Disaster Relief and Resilience Act. Audubon has been a longtime supporter and working behind the scenes on that bill. It creates a new state resiliency officer for South Carolina and an Office of Resilience, which will help in statewide resilience planning, which we know is really important as we're dealing with sea level rise, severe storms, flooding. So this office will be able to coordinate those efforts to help address the threats that we're facing here in South Carolina. It also creates a new revolving loan program that will fund a voluntary buyout of properties that are often flooded, and help restore those properties to natural habitat, which, as you can imagine, would be great for birds and something that we have been tracking for a couple of years and want to be involved in moving forward as it's implemented. Another requirement as a part of this bill will be that local governments must incorporate resilience into their comprehensive planning processes, which again is another victory we think for birds and wildlife. We're going to continue to monitor the work that is going to be coming out of this bill. And we look forward next year in the legislature to try to get additional funding to support these efforts as one of our top priorities. The second thing that we've been watching in the legislature this year that we made some progress on was having the General Assembly elect 4 new commissioners to serve on the Public Service Commission. And a lot of people's eyes gloss over when we start talking about the Public Service Commission because many people have never heard of it, but it's actually one of the state's most powerful regulatory bodies. They have control over a ton of decisions that impact our daily lives. And specifically for us, we're really interested in the decisions that they make around energy, clean energy, renewable energy. They can decide how much we pay for electricity, where our electricity comes from, what sources we use, which is really important as we're thinking about increasing solar energy in South Carolina. And it was really important for Audubon to be engaged in the election of those 4 new commissioners. We weighed in with comments around the type of qualities we would like to see in new commissioners, and we feel really confident that the 4 that the General Assembly elected are well qualified and highly disciplined. And we hope that they're going to put the clean energy future that we all want on the forefront of their agenda as they're getting settled in those new roles. So that was a great victory for us, something that's a little bit out of the spotlight, but as many of us know, it's sort of the behind the scenes bureaucracy that often has the biggest impact on these policies. I will note that on both the clean energy work and the resiliency bill that I just discussed, the Beaufort County Legislative Delegation remains very supportive on these issues and other conservation issues. And we always find ways, as I think you have as well, to thank them and share our gratitude for the voices that they're bringing to this work. Finally, I wanted to mention that we were working earlier this year with Congressman Joe Cunningham, who represents coastal South Carolina, including our areas, on the Great American Outdoors Act. He was the lead on that bill. This is a photo from earlier this summer. We joined Congressman Cunningham here in Charleston to talk about the bill and how it would provide permanent funding for a program called the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a federal program that has been used to fund protections of important habitat for birds and other wildlife. It's been used to create new local, state, and national parks and preserve historical sites across the United States. The bill was passed this summer. President Trump signed it into law, and it's a great accomplishment, I think, for conservation and for birds. So kudos to the congressman for leading that effort. And again, another priority for Audubon that we're really pleased to see move forward, even during this really challenging time. Next slide. Another great photo here to highlight the work that we're doing at our 2 Audubon centers here in South Carolina. If you haven't had the opportunity to visit Bidler Forest in Dorchester County or Silver Bluff up in Aiken County, please do plan a day trip soon. We have over 20,000 acres at those two sites to explore, and we have been able to keep the walking trails at both centers open during the pandemic. We've added some new walking trails at Bidler that are allowing people to get out into grasslands and woodland areas that we've never been able to invite the public out to before. So it's really an exciting time at Bidler with a lot of new activities that we're looking to do this fall and over the winter and next spring. And this is just one of many that we're starting to unveil. And so if you get up there, please get out on the trails. You can also get out on the boardwalk. Here in a couple of weeks, we're reopening our 2-mile boardwalk at Bidler Forest that allows you to journey through the swamp there. We are requiring people to register online. So take a look and check out both of those sites. There's a lot of great things to do outdoors this fall if you have a day or two. I also wanted to highlight the National Park Underground Railroad Network to Freedom site application that we submitted at Bidler earlier this year. We are hoping that the National Park would designate this as an Underground Railroad Network to Freedom site to help us tell a really important story about the history of Bidler and the individuals who sought refuge in the swamp surrounding Bidler Forest after escaping slavery. It's a really interesting and untold story for that region, and Bidler plays a real critical role in that story. So we are looking forward to hopefully receiving that designation later this year and being able to do some more events and activities around that. And then finally, I would just note that we are continuing our science work, our community science. We're moving forward with Motus Towers across South Carolina. So it's glad to hear that you all are doing that as well. And then our education and some of our programs have shifted to virtual formats, and would encourage you to keep track of those by following us on social media, or if you're not on our email list, we'll make sure to add you. We've had some really great success in terms of getting people to tune in and encourage them to get out to the two centers. Next slide. I just wanted to drop this photo in. This is sunrise at Silver Bluff in Aiken County earlier this summer. It was taken near the Woodstork Ponds. And again, hopefully it'll entice you to make a visit up to Silver Bluff soon and check out that really spectacular place. Next week, I wanted to remind everyone that we'll be celebrating Native Plant Week in South Carolina. It's been designated by the governor a few years ago. We have a few activities that we are planning, including planting a native plant garden in the mansion. This is the third year we've done that, and we will be featuring that planting on social media. So look online and watch out for that. On Friday, we'll be installing a rain garden at Silver Bluff, and we'll also be providing an online video and sort of a one-on-one on what we're doing there at Silver Bluff. So we hope you'll join us there. And again, you can find that on our Facebook page. And of course, we encourage you to personally participate and encourage others to plant your favorite native plants next week as we celebrate Native Plant Week in South Carolina. I wanted to take a little bit of a deeper look at some of the work that we're doing here along the coast of South Carolina, because it really aligns with what you all are doing at the Chapter and Bird Club. And I think it's really important for us as we move forward. And I want to share too how we're connected with our international alliances work through some of these initiatives. Next slide, Olga. This is just a reminder of our guiding mission around our coastal work. We are working with communities up and down the South Carolina coast to steward, restore, and protect important areas for birds. And as you all know really well, we want to ensure that the birds that spend time here in South Carolina can thrive in the face of climate change, sea level rise, and the development that we're experiencing along the coast of South Carolina. So that's what guides our work on our coastal program. And Nolan is on the phone today. You all probably know Nolan really well, and he's doing a fantastic job at leading our coastal work here in South Carolina. As you also know that there are a number of threats that we are monitoring that threaten birds along South Carolina's coast. And these threats are helping to inform and shape where and how we do our work. And I won't go through all of them. You see them on this slide here, but the bottom line is we know that birds are facing really unprecedented challenges that are threatening their future, and it jeopardizes our future and our community's future. And what we believe is that when we help birds in the places that they need here in South Carolina, that we're going to be protecting people, communities, and our economy. And I really think that's what's exciting about working at Audubon today, and that's what makes us so relevant. And it's made us a real leader and influencer in the environmental and conservation space. And it really guides the work that we're doing on our coastal work, our coastal program here in South Carolina. So as I mentioned, we have a great lead on coastal work with Nolan, and he is helping us to build out a 3 to 5 year vision, a really ambitious vision, I would say, for Audubon's work in South Carolina to protect our coastline for birds and for communities. And that vision is looking at a few areas that I wanted to highlight with you today. And many of you have been and will continue to be really vital supporters of this work. And we will be finding ways over the next 6 to 9 months to engage with you all more around the plan that we're building for our work here in South Carolina and help inform that. We're looking at projects that can help restore or protect important habitat. I think Bay Point is a great example of a really important place that we have identified that we have to continue to work to protect moving forward. And so we're looking at other places along the coast of South Carolina where we want to prioritize our work and our partnership with other organizations. The photo here is a great reminder of the work that John and the chapter and our Audubon State Office is doing to stem the really dramatic decline of horseshoe crabs and help raise awareness about the importance they play in the ecosystem. And hats off to John for the work that he's done today. And we're so pleased to have that partnership, not only here with people and organizations in South Carolina, but up and down the Atlantic Flyway. Policy is another area that we are looking at having an impact, like the resiliency bill that I mentioned earlier, because we know that public policy plays a huge role and has a huge impact around the work that we want to do to protect the coastline. We will be continuing our coastal stewardship program and looking for ways to grow and enhance the work that Nolan has led over the last few years and that many of you have supported through your efforts. We continue to be grounded in everything that we do in science. We think science and research capabilities are really important. We have a wonderful science team here here at Audubon that we partner with around our work in South Carolina, and they really help us pinpoint the most important places and actions for us to take to help birds. And finally, I would note that we know that we can only do so much here in South Carolina, that we have to consider the full life cycle of species, that we have to think about partnerships up and down the Atlantic Flyway. The Horseshoe Crab Coalition is a great example of that, partnering across states and organizations that are working in a lot of different places. And for me, that means deepening our work with our International Alliances program. And Matt Jeffrey is here today to share a little bit more about his work and the work that they're doing on the International Alliances program and why it's relevant to Audubon South Carolina and in particular, some of the connection we have with the Hilton Head chapter. So I'll turn it over to Matt for a few minutes to walk us through some slides and an update from his end.
Thank you, Justin. And it's wonderful to see so many people and to be back, even if it is virtually, with Hilton Head Audubon. It was back in 2010 that I was actually invited down to give a talk with you guys. A long time ago now. Certainly a little larger, certainly have more beard, but it was a great time, and it was really when we were just starting to think about the Bahamas and the role the Bahamas may play in the conservation of a bird that you guys care about and we care about at Audubon, is the piping plover. If you go to the next slide, Hilton Head, Audubon, I can't thank you guys enough. You gave us a $10,000 grant to support our very first surveys in the Bahamas for the 2011 census. And that was really the catalyst that got us on the ground, managed to build a huge coalition of organizations, both local in the Bahamas, but also from throughout the Atlantic Flyway, to really understand the importance of the Bahamas, not just for piping plovers, but for shorebirds from throughout the Atlantic Flyway. And this map here, shows the bigger the spots, the more birds. But it really has helped us map out the entire archipelago. We now know where we need to work, where to focus, how to influence policy. And I have to say that the Bahamas definitely has the piping plover on its radar, something that wasn't in existence back when we talked last time. If you go to the next slide, Olga. The Andros there, if anyone knows the Bahamas, that's Andros Island, and just that big splot on the north is something called the Jolta Keys. It's a set of keys and big intertidal flats. And just to the right of that is, in the top of that circle, is something called the Berry Islands. If you haven't been there, they're beautiful. I definitely recommend it. But this is where a majority of the birds are going. It's about 30% of the entire Atlantic coast population of piping plovers that end up in those few areas. If you go to the next slide, Olga. So I'm here to celebrate with you because it's your victory as much as it is mine. We actually got our first protected area back in 2015, 92,000 acres, Jolta Keys, about 10% of the Atlantic coast piping plover population that winters on this one area, as along with a huge amount of marine life and some of the best intact coral reefs left in what is the third largest barrier reef in the world. And so we're super, super proud of that accomplishment, and that would not have been made possible without that initial investment and the research and the science that went in after that. I'm super excited that we also have the Berry Islands that looks like it will go into protection later this year. COVID has slowed a few things down, but sometime, hopefully in 2020, because that's the commitment from the Bahamian government, there's the Berry Islands, among many other important areas for shorebirds and seabirds, are going to go into protection as sort of this next round of protections the country is looking at. And so all of this has been made possible because Audubon came to the table, Audubon did the science, Audubon worked with our partners and built constituencies and local support for the birds. And we were there in the room championing shorebirds and seabirds as the country went through planning processes for their new protected areas. So super, super exciting. Protected areas is only one step. We now have to manage them. We now have to think about how we move forward in those areas that are not protected, how the communities can play a role. But we've come an awful long way in a decade. It really is a phenomenal experience and a phenomenal result that I think shocked many people. If you go to the next slide. And I was so pleased to hear all of you talk about Modus towers. We also did some cutting edge science with piping plovers and nanotags with Modus towers. This is now a few years ago, so the network wasn't quite as extensive as it is now. But one of the birds flew all the way from a 24-hour flight from Andros in the Bahamas all the way to Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge in South Carolina. That's the longest known flight. Longest known flight for any piping plover that was new. This is new to science, and you can see from that connection, and we have a lot of data here from community scientists that go out and report the flags, and maybe some of you even have done this. The piping plovers have these little from the Bahamas. They're pink flags, and they have like a alphanumeric code, so A's and letters and numbers. And if you're really good and you have a really good telescope, you can read those tags, and then you can report it to the network, and we can sort of see where these birds and build the life histories of these birds. And we have now the life histories of many, many birds on the Atlantic coast. And we can tell you that every single state, every single place, including Hilton Head in South Carolina, is an important part of the life cycle of many of these birds. And we're able to sort of show that we're all connected. We're all connected. We're connected to the wintering sites of these birds, and the collective effort, the work you're doing in South Carolina, along with all the work that's been doing in the breeding grounds from Canada all the way through to North Carolina, has meant that this is a good news story. The bird is actually over 2,000 breeding pairs for the first time in 40 years on the Atlantic coast. That was announced this year. So this is a bird that's actually increasing in population. We talk so much about how birds are trouble. This bird still needs a lot of work, but it's heading in the right direction, and it's a proof that we can really make a difference if we have a collective effort and we all play our roles. Next slide, Olga. So that's one bird, and I heard you talking about species like the black-polled warbler that you saw, and some of the hooded warblers and some of the other birds that you've been seeing lately as they migrate south through South Carolina. And I think you will recognize, because this is also part of your annual birding experience, is the birds spend a majority of their time on the wintering grounds, majority of the time outside of the United States, whether that's breeding in the boreal in Canada or wintering in Central South America. We know that, and we're hearing from many different directions, that these birds are having problems, and many of those that are having problems are actually the migratory birds. And so we need to not just do business as usual, we need to step it up. We need to really get to scale and move forward so that we can actually change some of the directions, similar to the piping plover for these birds. And so Audubon has hired a new senior vice president for the International Alliances program. And together we're building a new business strategy, if you go to the next slide, Olga, that is starting to look at species like the Python-tree warbler, which is another species I know you guys care about. And in fact, some of these spots are the geolocator tags from Bidler Forest. And so we're combining all this community science work that goes into eBird, the tracking data that we're getting through bird bands, and this great sort of new technology that's coming on board to show how these birds are moving between places. And if you go to the next slide, Olga, and looking at the latest peer-reviewed papers on prioritization of sites. And so we're coming up with this sort of much bigger, much more ambitious strategy that's really going to help us and help Audubon, but more importantly, work with all of our partners and bring the whole community together around a much bigger, more strategic approach for saving some of these birds and reversing some of the declines. We estimate that in Latin America and the Caribbean, somebody needs to be working on about 193 million hectares just to save 10% of the populations of about 160 species, which is huge. And it's more than one organization can do. It's more than 10 organizations can do. We need to bring everyone. We need to make everyone bird crazy and all work in a similar direction. If you go to the next slide, Olga. We think we can play a significant role. We can switch some of this around by thinking about some of not just the normal, how do we save the individual sites, but how do we get that to scale? How do we save multiple sites at the same time? And so we got this ambitious process. We're looking at new protections. So thinking about what we're calling the sub-national protected areas. This would be similar to the state wildlife agencies and the state parks. But thinking about Central South America and having those state parks developed, but not doing one at a time, but trying to build a fund that can dedicate 80 to 100 protected areas across 5 countries, thinking about important bird areas and where those important bird areas are, which birds are hugely underrepresented in the existing protected areas in these countries. So really turning the tables and making the birds the focus. And protecting IBAs through this program. We're looking at agricultural systems that, a little bit like shade-grown coffee, and I'm sure many of you are drinking shade-grown coffee to support the birds. Well, we're thinking about something that's similar, but shade-grown cows through our subnational protected area program, where you can create canopy over the cows. You can increase productivity. So this isn't just about the birds and biodiversity. It actually has higher profits for the farmer. And how we can create sort of corridors between protected areas through this process. And this is getting a lot of traction and has a lot of promise. But the birds are not part of the equation yet. We need to make the birds part of the equation. So we're planting the right trees and we're planting the right, creating the right corridors so the birds benefit. Similar to what you're doing in South Carolina, we're working on a coastal program. We have a great project in Panama where we're looking at blue carbon and using blue carbon as an incentive to through mangroves there, but equally could be salt marsh, and how that can play a role in the economic analysis and community, reduce flooding and reduce coastal erosion, et cetera, and obviously we need to do that with a grassroots network and really build a constituency, just like you guys here in the US, where you have a constituency, you're able to advocate for policies. We need to start almost from scratch in many of these countries to build something similar to do exactly the same thing. So if you go to the next slide there, Olga. So I'm going to let Justin just finish this off. That's all I have for you right now. I'm happy to answer more questions, but hopefully we'll get a chance to come back and talk more about some of these great initiatives going forward at another time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
It's so great. Matt and I worked together in the DC office and got to know each other over the last 3 years, and it's really wonderful to begin deepening our partnership between the work here in Audubon, South Carolina, and the work that he is doing. And I wanted to share this slide. We are, you think you can see from Matt's presentation what a catalyst the investment from Hilton Head chapter was for our work in the Bahamas. And we are really building these great ambitious visions here at Audubon around all of our work. And we're doing it because we have the generosity and the support of individuals, of Audubon members, of foundations, of corporations. We work to be good stewards of those resources and find government grants to leverage and enhance that work. And just to demonstrate how much we've grown our work, both of our programs are working right now to secure a combined $725,000 in funding over the next 3 years to continue growing and building this work out in South Carolina, in the Bahamas, and across Audubon. So I wanted to share that with you all so that you understand what your contribution did and how it's grown our work here in South Carolina and with the International Alliances program. And certainly we always welcome opportunities to discuss additional funding to support our work, but we are certainly deeply grateful for the support you've given, both with your contribution and the time and energy that you all put into the work that we all care a lot about. So I wanted to end on that note. And John, I think we welcome questions and comments and others from folks on the call, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get started in a minute. I just wanted to put a little note out to Matt, and I think your presentation was terrific. Someone on the island spotted a piping plover at our Fish Hall Beach location, which is our best shorebird location. This was a plover that was banded in Holgate in New Jersey. That's part of the Forsyth Refuge. Yeah. And, so it's really interesting, to look at, some of the points were noting on the migration map, how you're seeing, that bird who was in New Jersey, it's in South Carolina now, and it's likely to be in the Bahamas probably before too long. So that's pretty cool. And Peggy Lucas, who I think is on the phone, tells me that out in Harbor Island, they see New Jersey banded birds a lot. So anyway, that's very cool research. We really thank you for the update on that. And Justin, thank you for giving us the big picture of what Audubon South Carolina is doing for us all today. Before we get to questions, I was remiss in not introducing Olga before, and she's been patiently on the phone advancing slides and so forth, but give you an opportunity to wave and introduce yourself if you wish.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, John. So I have the distinct pleasure out of everybody at Audubon to work with some incredible vice presidents and directors and leads, and that's Matt Jeffrey, Justin Stokes, and Andrew Hudson in North Carolina. So I'm their development support for all these 3 programs. And so we look forward to, creating the resources or identifying the resources and securing them so this work can continue.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. And Nolan, thanks
Thank
to
you.
you also. Thanks to you also. Let's see. Anybody who wants to ask a question at this point?
Pretty comprehensive spot. Okay.
So I have a question. Is there anybody on the call that was here 10 years ago when Matt came and spoke about the Bahamas and the piping plovers? Or are we
Yes,
a
but I
new
don't
crowd?
remember.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, if whoever was making that comment comes back, let us know. I think it does speak to the fact that these organizations, there's a lot of turnover over the course of time, which is why I really think it's very important for you to come back here and talk about something we did a decade ago that really helped to start something really big and important. So for those of us who were newer than 2010, it's really just very cool to learn that story. So thank you.
Sure. So Kay Grinnell, I think, said that she was here. I'm seeing it in the chat. That's great.
Yeah.
Good.
I
Hey,
was
John,
too.
It's Jack. John?
Hi, Jack.
Hey. I was wondering, Justin, if you can elaborate a little more on the term resilience in the Resilience Act.
Yeah, that is a good question, and we should probably do a better job of explaining that. I think a lot of it is the thinking around how are we using natural infrastructure versus hard infrastructure, like when you think about hard infrastructure like roads, bridges, seawalls. How can you use natural infrastructure as part of projects? When you think about how are we restoring habitat or protecting important land that can make communities more resilient in terms of withstanding severe flooding, sort of navigating flooding, thinking about the work that we all did to protect Bay Point, and what we know about building infrastructure or the safety of the community, or what that would, what constructing out there would do to that habitat that we find really important to birds. And sort of all of that, I would say, is what we think about in terms of building more resilient communities and what this bill would aim to do.
And the Public Service Committee people are going to be investigating all of those things?
The Public Service Commission, they have pretty broad oversight over a lot of decisions that the legislature makes, not just environmental decisions, but certainly we care about it from an environmental end. But a lot of, you find a lot of the legislation that the state legislators will pass may be ambiguous or needs to be implemented. And so a lot of it gets sent to the Public Service Commission to figure out what are the particular details of how the state should go about implementing a bill. And that's where they have a lot of power and say around how to interpret a piece of legislation that may be somewhat ambiguous. And so they can make some pretty significant decisions. It is particularly important as we're thinking about expanding solar in South Carolina or renewable energy They have a good bit of say over utilities in South Carolina and how utilities are regulated.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? No, seems like yeah, I think your presentation was pretty all encompassing.
Yes.
So I think yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question for you, John. Does Audubon Hilton Head ever do trips abroad? Do you ever sort of do travel trips with for
We do.
the chapter members? Because one of the projects we have is we've set up we've been training guides in several countries and working with the governments to set up birding trails. And obviously we can't do that right now, but thinking in the future if there's opportunity to engage or get people to meet you if you go on any of these trips or anything like that.
Yeah, so Matt, it's actually I think been quite some time since we have done an overseas trip. We are putting our toe back in the water, hopefully in 2021 with a trip to Costa Rica being led by Carlos Chacon, who is the naturalist at the Coastal Discovery Museum and field trip leader for Hilton Head Audubon. So, I think we would like in the future to be able to do this once, twice a year. And, but we'll see how this first one goes. Of course, it's going to be a little strange. And it's going to be a little touch and go between now and next spring when the trip was planned, because we obviously just really need to keep watching the virus and understanding travel restrictions and all of that. But the good thing is Costa Rica as a destination point, they've done an excellent job with the virus and have very good safety travel protocols in place. So
yeah,
we
and
will see.
Just opened up, I believe.
Yeah. So. Matt, we can connect on that really at any time because I think this is something that we'd love to expand.
Sounds good.
All right, so everybody knows where we can be reached. I hope in the chat, Matt and Justin have put their emails. So if you have any questions afterward or anytime, I'm sure they're happy to answer them. And Justin.
John?
Oh, it looks like Carol wants. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought of a question just now, if we still have time for one.
Sure.
I wanted to make a comment too, that this was such a fascinating presentation and just incredible to hear about the big picture in all of this. But one of the slides you showed was the map of the Motus Towers up and down the coast.
Mhm.
Is that information, is that map available anywhere online that we can access and look at that?
Yeah, actually the better map, I'll send you the Motus. There's a website for all the Motus Towers everywhere. And it's just online. So I'll look that up and send that out to John, and maybe he can share it with the group.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. All right, so thank you once again to our guests from Audubon. Thank you to our friends from Sun City Bird Club, and thanks to all of you who came out to spend some of your afternoon with us. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity, Justin, the next time you get to travel to Hilton Head. We'll take you out to see the Audubon Newhall Preserve. I know you haven't had an opportunity to visit yet, and we're very proud of it. So we'll leave that to an occasion, hopefully before too long, and certainly hopefully once this is all behind us. Anyway, thank you all. I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon, either in person or online. So take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great job.
Bye.